Sure.
I think it will be good if people,
Okay.
whoever can switch on their cameras. So I want it more conversational than me speaking
Uh,
to the dark chamber.
yes, but if there is a bandwidth issue, like if it start affecting the voice and video quality, then we may request people except the speaker to shut off the camera. Otherwise, it's fine. So we can try that to start with, and if there's an issue, then we will ask people to. Is that fine?
We are live.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to HBCSE seminar, which we are restarting today after a break. Let me begin by extending a warm welcome to Dr. Suraj Yengde. On behalf of HBCSE, I thank Suraj for accepting our invitation for today's talk and you all for being part of it. Dr. Suraj Yengde is currently a senior fellow at the Harvard Kennedy School. He holds a research associate position with the Department of African and African American Studies, a non-resident fellow at the Hutchins Center for African and African American Research, and is part of the founding team of Initiative for Institutional Anti-Racism and Accountability at Harvard University. He has studied in 4 continents, Asia, Africa, Europe, and North America, and is India's first Dalit PhD holder from an African university, University of Witwatersrand, Johannesburg. Suraj is the author of the bestseller Caste Matters, which you can see in his background as well, and co-editor of award-winning anthology, The Radical in Ambedkar. He has delivered over 300 lectures, keynotes at international academic conferences and seminars across the world on the issues of casteism, racism, institutionalized discrimination, diversity, and inclusion. Today, he will be talking to us on perspectives on education of the marginalized in the 21st century. He will talk about the nature and role of education in addressing the issues faced by marginalized societies by drawing on his vast and varied experiences. The talk can also be an opportunity to interact with Suraj about his bestseller book, Caste Matters, and other writings, in particular during the question answer session. Handing over to Suraj. How would you like it? Usually we have 40 minutes talk plus 20 minutes question. Is that a fine format, or would you like people to interrupt or reserve the questions at the end? What do you prefer?
I think we'll make it more conversational. So please interrupt in between. So we would like to
Okay.
have it more democratic space. That's why I was, whoever can and have a good bandwidth on their network, feel free to switch on the camera so we can have a more
Yeah.
classroom type of exercise than, than just a lecture format.
Okay. So if there are people can switch on your cameras as requested by Suraj, and then we'll see if there are issues, then we can, take it from there. Yeah, over to you, Suraj. You can start.
Thank you, Masood, and thank you, Ayush, for the flashback, for the flashing of Caste Matters. I would like to extend my thanks to the colleagues at TIFR for very kindly inviting me. It took us about, I think, a month or two to get to this, so I appreciate the patience. As you all know, COVID has changed our lives, and this has really made much of change, good and bad, mostly bad. But also, I think we should find grace in some of the outcomes of this pandemic. I would like to speak to a few broader themes today, with a hope that this conversation then takes us into various domains. I've always wanted to, whenever I came to Mumbai, I've never visited TIFR, and less so the Homi Baba Center for Science and Education. Maybe next time when in meeting is possible, I would like to have an opportunity to see what this elite institution. I think TIFR is probably one of those quote unquote untainted government sanctioned institutions, as opposed to IITs, IIMs, and much of other social science institutions. So there must be something going on, or perhaps people just don't understand the atomic nature of what kind of work you guys do. Whatever the case may be, here we are. I will draw some of my remarks today from colleagues who have worked in IISC, more particularly Rennie Thomas's ethnographic work that he conducted in IISC Bangalore, to try to understand how caste and science marry each other in the Indian social as well as scientific setting. There is more than what we apparently judge or estimate as to how caste is part and parcel of our thinking, and as well as our mode of knowledge making and knowledge producing. One of the earlier instances that we continue to wrestle with is, is caste even part of how we think and how we debate science? And then, is science actually casteist in its Indian setting? Now, much of the arguments about science as being rationally mode, which is scientifically driven, methodologically sound, result oriented, peer reviewed form of knowledge, does not need to have other societal inputs to taint or contaminate its pristine nature. However, what we see further investigating into this is caste is as much a part of how we imagine science, how we produce science, and of course, how we execute that science. And that can very well be exemplified with two examples. One is, of course, looking at the diversity ratio of our science educational institutions. And second is what kind of scientists are operating in the spaces who are challenging, channeling, producing, as well as acting as custodians of this knowledge and science. In a broader context, to kind of highlight Rennie Thomas's research in this particular instance, is they were in his research mostly in Bangalore. They were subtle forms of supremacies that animated the students' viewpoint. When we look at the ratio of scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and other backward classes, we come to a point as to really see how science is actually being held by within the grips of certain caste groups. Now, if you look at the composition of IISC, about 484 academic staff are employed. Within that, what we see is less than 5% of those belong to scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC. Now, this is fundamentally a sea change when we see the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, and OBC belong to approximately, if you combine the population ratio, 77% of India's population. 77% of India's population is represented with 13% in the most elite admitted institute when it comes to the domain of science, the IISC, which is government funded and which has to follow the government norms. Now, how does this then get penetrated into how we envision and how we produce a knowledge, or how we discuss knowledge? There are various ways we can approach this. One of the methodological way to really understand about how a marginalized perspective gets uplifted or suppressed is to go and for example, dip our minds into the history. The first half of 20th century, and think about the great scientist Meghnad Saha. Now, some of you all might be aware if you are from the discipline of astrophysics, but a legendary figure who actually worked on thermal ionization, who find out the temperatures and more particularly how this theory, which is calculating the temperature of sun with its own formulation, especially within the equation of thermal ionization, has actually contributed to the ionization of various elements, more particularly calcium. Now, Meghnad Saha is one of the pioneers in his own right when it comes to science in India. He is not only a pioneer in launching new scientific inquiries and producing amazing results, but also this gentleman was highly invested in marrying society with science. And for that purpose, he launches a science and culture journal, and of course the association that kind of interfaces with science and society. Now these are, of course, he is contemporary of many of our well-known people, Satyendranath Bose, or C.V. Raman, and the likes, and we are talking about that specific generation. Now, there is a very interesting aspect of Meghnad Saha's biography. Now, Meghnad Saha not only launches new inquiries, but his research is then, due to his inability to carry further, there were two prominent reasons, and they kind of connect to each other, was lack of finances. Now, when Saha was advocating for more science-inspired societal investigation, there was a move in this regard that we need a foreign support, a financial support, so of course we can then develop our own science. And now within this, C.V. Raman opposed this move and hoped to have a more indigenous ways or looking at equipments and not relying on a foreign-based funding. And because of that, of course, Saha was deprived of funds. One of this is seen with when he sends his pioneering paper to a journal here in the UK. They ask him, and as was the practice during that time, if you're publishing paper, if it needs published, you need to really contribute to publishing. He couldn't afford, he cannot afford, and of course, an important research gets unpublished, and then that, instead of publishing an international reputed journal where you have more eyes, it gets published in a journal in India based in Calcutta. Now, Meghnad Saha's story then exemplifies an important status of how he channeled his own creative genius to then not getting settled with what was with him. He launches much of his activities into political as well as societal initiatives, and that's why becomes part of National Planning Commission, which was then run by Indian National Congress in the 1930s under the chairmanship of Nehru. Eventually falls out of Nehru because Nehru then follows the capitalist industrialist class known as Bombay Group, and then contests an independent election and gets into the parliament as an independent candidate, and then keeps on rallying for much of his initiative. Meghnad Saha is not only an individual who is just launching scientific journals and creating political works, but also he is launching new institutions as wherever he is taking place. Of course, he goes to Allahabad, and of course, later he spends his time in Calcutta or Kolkata, his province, West Bengal, as we call it today. In this story, Meghnad Saha gets nominated to Nobel Prize 6 times. It starts, I think, in 1930s and ends in 1956, probably, when he or 56 when he dies. Now, this is an amazing feat of a man who at the age of 34 gets inducted as a fellow of Royal Society, which is again an distinguished honor in the field. Meghnad Saha's journey is not yet mainstream. We do not know about this great man who has a feud with the great C.V. Raman. Meghnad Saha is a Dalit from Bengal. And when we try to exemplify life of people like Saha, we see why Saha doesn't become an inspiration that crosses seas. It is very interesting for me to notice that much of the Brahminical discourse easily assimilates and sits almost in juxtaposition with the science, the various practices within students and within academics to maintain a certain niche form of Brahminism is very much part of how you think about science in Indian context. Starting from specially education institutes in India, it's a comical that we have segregation in eating. The mess is segregated according to vegetarian, non-vegetarian, and then there is in IISc at least there was a third category about North Indian. Now, what we definitely see is we really create cordons. We create an apartheid of distinction right from consuming the food to again not transcending to the new boundaries that the society has given us. Brahminism and Brahmin supremacy then becomes a point of departure to our inquiries of thinking about how 21st century knowledge deems to be a backward knowledge if it is not addressing the fundamental research problems or societal problems that it needs to address in the first instance. Meghnad Saha-like figures could not have had happen in post-independent India. If they are, their biography remains unknown. While we celebrate the great Brahmin figures for their contribution to science, the backward caste or the tribals or the Dalit discourse really doesn't get assimilated as a mainstream food of thought for people to then pursue a new research and new and explain the new dynamics that exist in their own disciplinary backgrounds. With Meghnad Saha, what we also see is there are other important aspects that our society needs to address. If you look at IITs again, one of the other crown jewels, less than 3% of the faculty belongs to the SC/ST, at least the record that I saw 2 years ago. I don't know how much it has changed now. IIMs, at least we were lobbying for more diversity. There was only one tribal out of the total IIMs, which is a very interesting insight for us to see how we deprive a tribal knowledge inclusion into our own political as well as educational praxis. And then within the 13 IIMs that we saw, there were only within the 20 there were only 13 who were belonging to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe. Now, this is a prominent way to really not think about how diversity or how lack of representation creates a mediocre knowledge. And the best example of this is none of the education institutes are in top 100. Even though we might beat our chest with claiming a pride, we have not managed to create our own status as the leading knowledge producers. Much of the talent has to then find its space, and then they become like Amartya Sen and many other pioneering or cutting edge researchers who then get assimilated into this. Now, in the faculty representation, especially talking about IITs, they were out of 20, 12 IITs which had no scheduled caste, no scheduled tribe. Now, this is a dark picture that we are seeing. And the top IIMs, which follow with Bangalore, Ahmedabad, Calcutta, Lucknow, Indore. Only Bangalore had one, and Lucknow had one. Others trickle down. Similarly, what we effectively see is the majority of diversity initiatives that should have gone into science has not remained as a project of the leaders within the science discipline. Now, one might say we don't look at caste. One might say there's no caste as such. Don't bring caste into our own. Caste is outside. Caste is politics. Don't bring it into our gates. We are just here, totally education inspired, driven initiative. Ask yourself how much of your caste privilege has given you an opportunity to think for yourself. Like again in Rennie Thomas's research, especially in IISc, the Brahmin student who he interviewed said that the attitude of looking at research was very much part of patience, and because they could afford to have patience to find results, they could pursue a research in this. What this definitely says is other fields or other people do not have adequate appetite to carry research or have that kind of patience because these people are just running for jobs. I think this is a highly misreading of a society. I think if given chance, everybody within a generation or two will work their way out and find more of solutions in their own vocational training as well as research. Now, let me briefly take you to how then this gets institutionalized in our society. I don't know, and I would like to know from you, TIFR, how many scheduled caste, scheduled tribe students are there within your intake, and how many faculties belong to scheduled caste and scheduled tribe are existing within your own collegial space. This will help us to really understand how new research is being carried out without including majority of the population. Now, this is very important. You all know that science, especially the New England Journal, which is very prestigious in at least in the science field, took a very conscious decision to not only focus on diversity as their cardinal principle, but they were also promoting, they opposed Trump for his anti-scientific statement. I want to know how many of professors, students within the science institutions who devote their life to promote scientific thinking and contribute to new innovative technological developments participate in undermining the retrograde superstitious values that are promoted as a religious or cultural ethic in our society. Because it's a responsibility on many of us who think ourselves as an enlightened generation, enlightened mind, because who has the capacity and acumen to decipher reason with stupidity. We could then also see how our responsibilities do not remain confined to our own conferences, journal publications, or supervising our students and producing next generation. Have we taken conscious decision to challenge some authoritarian moves that undermine much of the thinking? And here I bring out the people who devoted their life to promotion of science, getting killed by the fanatic Hindu organizations in India, more particularly Narendra Dabholkar, who was fighting against the superstition in society, which is again institutionalized. So our responsibility here, friends and colleagues, increases manifold as to where we then draw a line of our own soul as well as soul with OUL and soul with SOLE. And I think with this perspective, a marginalized perspective is actually a mainstream perspective. It's the perspective of the Constitution. It's the perspective of human ethic. And for us to live in a society of equals and not have marginalizations anymore, we need to uplift those causes. Now, people with class benefits undermine the experiences of people who were never in the corridors of power and as well as power sharing. And due to this, what we see is a very pricked knowledge gets eventually sanctioned as as an authority in certain fields. And here I see at my own discipline, social sciences, anthropology, and history in particular, as to how certain hierarchies melt or solidify, rather, excuse me, into becoming new forms of gates, where new entrants will have to qualify or rather follow the model established in the society. We have a high devotion and a fake losing aptitude of looking back at ancient India and celebrating it as a purveyor of science. That might as well be true, but we might also have to recognize that ancient India is also responsible for horrible caste atrocities and genocides that were committed, and continues to inspire contemporary generation to persecute the marginalized people. Sometimes it's more oftentimes it is a naked form of demonstration of hatred through violence, a hacking of bodies of people belong to Dalit and marginalized communities, but also that has then gotten into policy making as well as decision making of institutions. For Dalits, more particularly, education is the only way out for them. They don't own resources. They don't have historical or hereditary wealth that they can rely on. That's why education becomes the only gate to imagine something new. Had I had no education, I would have just lived in one room house of my family's inheritance, which was again bought by a labor worker, which was my grandfather. What we in this scenario see is, unless we step outside of our comfort zone and culturally inform ourselves and become accessible to the rest of the world and make it more attractive, we might not have many astrophysicists like Meghnad Saha from the community that we would really like to uplift. Reproducing similar forms of knowledge with similar minds and similar janaeus is not progress. It's actually stamping of the hierarchical Brahminism that gets food stamped into knowledge making. Some of the experiences, of course, I read some of the testimonials of scientists who went to, who are of a progressive bent, who loathe and try to work without a Brahminism or Brahminic ethic, have found themselves staring at a wall on the both sides. It is because the niche of this discipline continues to be uninformed culturally in our own thinking, and so if we need to make it more palatable to the communities that we would like to serve, I think we need to now start cultural education. They should be much of at least a compulsory course for each science education institute to talk about the history and sociology of castes in India. It needs to have a candid conversation as to how this knowledge is produced and how it is going to be contained and how it is going to be shared and how it is going to be then deployed in the community and society. If science is meant to serve the society, serve the people, or serve the demos, what we need to do then is get the demos to do that job, than us acting as the custodians or the collectors of this knowledge, who can then pass on certain rules and regulations to this. One of the fundamental difference that I see, especially here and in America with the colleagues that have spent time at Harvard and mostly at MIT, is their obsessive focus in bringing people of diversities into their labs. into their new projects, or in their incubations that they are trying to do. I haven't seen that work done by my good colleagues in the Indian institutes, which are of science or research and so forth. If we make it a conscious effort, of course, barring few honorable exceptions, where and it would be very good to highlight those names. Deepak Malgan does that in IIM Bangalore. I have Chinmay Tumbe who does it in IIM Ahmedabad, and of course few other honorable colleagues who have realized their own Brahmin privilege and sought out that the next hire they would do would would be a person belonging to a marginalized community, and they will invest in these resources. And I think what we need to do is we need to recognize that there is a problem called caste, there is a problem called Brahminism, there is a problem called Brahmin supremacy. This functions into what you eat, how you are taught, how you are connected, what kind of leisurely activities do, what kind of music you listen, what kind of societal inter-campus networks you make, and what kind of intimidations that you create. Do you really create a space for a person from marginalized community to be him or her without adhering to your food practices, to your own religious values? I think we need to really break this down. If science is not teaching you to break down these barriers, then really science is a surrogate of Brahminism in India. And this is a threat. Science will die if we do not do this, because the people who will then come from this, and you should know, as time is changing, evolution is happening. More and more people with my kind of name, my kind of background will occupy your spaces. Why don't we already start creating and catering that spaces so we don't feel more intimidated into this? Now, before offering my closure, I would like to ask you to help me think, how well can we think about 21st century as our century? 21st century is my favorite because this is my responsibility. This is part of my role. This is where I'm going to work. This is where I'm going to invest my time. And I want to make this correct. I want to try to do much of or most of the good changes that I can. And in this work and in this project, I would like you all to also help me think about how can we collectively join hands and think about our collective mutual futures. Because at the end of the day, if we have a democratic character in our institutions, in our way of looking at world, we will be really able to provide and do a service to the public than really making it an esoteric, non-accessible, some jargon-oriented field. Our responsibilities are to our discipline, but also I think are to the larger projects or larger goals whom we are, from whom we draw our benefits, our taxes, our salaries, and paid by the people. I think we should be responsible for that, and rather being loathsome, and we should be more radically informed about these differences that restructure or rather structure our way of thinking. And I think it is with this hope that I think we should now consider few ways of doing and sometimes undoing things. I think much of the time we'll have to do those both simultaneously, not less or not more. And for that to happen, I really hope there will be positive futures. And of course, addressing to you, colleagues, my also intention was to address other scientific institutions which are cropping up. But one of the important problems that remain unaddressed and almost carries as a threat is privatization of education, privatization of knowledge, privatization of these new developments. And India cannot afford that, because privatization will then again marginalize the communities that we would like to incorporate. And knowledge, the more it is privatized, it becomes ownership of few capitalists, few individuals who would like to wholesomely control everything and not democratize it. We can't have a non-democratic, which is again a road to fascism. And within fascism, as I argued recently in my piece, there's no equality and there's no democracy. it will lead to a extermination of a whole generation, like what happened during the Second World War in Europe and continues to happen in much of the rest of the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Suraj, for the thought-provoking talk. I don't think the TIFR statistics has a different story to tell, though I don't have the exact number with me, but some others in the audience may have, but I think it's more or less similar to what you have pointed out in the EIC story and all. And also pointing about the mismatch between discourse and actions, where discourse is often not leading to solid action. I would like to take up questions from audience. Please raise your hands, or you can speak. If there are two people talking simultaneously, then I may intervene. Otherwise, anybody can unmute and speak. Or you can post your questions in the chat, or
can I respond?
yeah, yes.
Yeah. I'm Subramaniam. I'm the Center Director of Homi Bhabha Center. So thank you for your talk, and thank you for raising these issues, which we believe are important, but I must admit that unfortunately we have not made much headway in bringing diversity of all kinds in the center. Of course, it's a small center. We do try for diversity in the faculty, in the students. At least that's kind of what we believe in. But also we are being a small place with the kind of, we work in area which is not common in India, which is the kind of interface between science and education. So we are an interdisciplinary center. So we have program where courses, students draw on humanities, social sciences, as well as science. And so being a kind of specialized place, we get very few applicants, particularly for faculty positions or for postdoc positions. It used to be the case also for students, but now the student applications are getting better. We are getting more number of applications. However, I don't think we are getting enough applications from a diversity of communities and backgrounds. So it would help us if more such people were directed to the center. Certainly, I would think that from our side, if you look at the applications we have rejected, that is, whether of students or of faculty, I don't think by looking at that, of course, if you look at the statistics of how many people are in this in the institution, whether as faculty or as students, that may not give a good picture of diversity of all kinds. There's some kinds of diversity, but not all kinds. But if you look at the rejection rate, perhaps we don't discriminate there. I mean, the rejections would be across all groups, and not. I don't recall many cases where applicants from marginalized backgrounds have been rejected. I could be wrong, but I think that might. Other colleagues can correct me or add to what I am saying. But this is true. So I think it would be helped if more applicants were directed, and somehow we get a diversity of applications. I think we may do somewhat better.
Thank you, Professor Subramaniam, for that comment of yours. I think, one of the ways I've been thinking about this for some time is, especially let's take an example of IIM with our colleagues there. We identified the reason for not having many scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or OBC candidates. And one of the reasons was that they don't really induct students into doctoral programs, and because that's a channel into this, and so what we emphasized was to concentrate a pre-doctoral training programs specifically targeting the students, like what NASA did. You know, eventually it did eventually, but also, you know, it went out and it concentrated on finding students from the Black colleges and poor neighborhoods, and you know, and we all know it's not something, you know, science is not something you learn, and you know, you have to have that space, and you know, and that's why I think what we need to do is we need to make it more appealing. I guess we need to make it more attractive. We need to create more inspirational figures, because once we are able to do that, you know, because if I look at somebody who belongs to my community at TIFR, for example, it is but natural that that's going to inspire at least you know, few thousand students to think about. But if I'm seeing another Malhotra or another Swamis, that ain't going to make any difference, because that's not reflecting my you know, my potential in that, because that really doesn't connect. And I think that's how many of this kind of cultural capital gets translated. um, and obviously, you know, if one needs to really create a conscious decision, one can, I think, then make a extra or give a treatment of preference if a person is coming from a marginalized background, so that we know we can create something out of that person. If we are applying the same standards across, then we really miss out on much of the newness that the community or the person is bringing. And much of the time, our meritocratic regime does that, and it fails miserably. Our so-called meritwalas have not produced ace new innovations that will you know, rival Facebook and Google and other technologies. Of course, they went there and, you know, contributed. So I think this is a very kind of a hypocritical space that Indian regime of especially custodians of knowledge have. And, you know, I've been telling them constantly, I've been advocating for it, in fact, that if I want a woman in my team, then I will get a woman in my team. There is no second thought if she is qualified enough as much as a male. If I need a queer person in my team, I will ensure I'll get a queer person in my team. About the qualities and qualifiers and qualifications, that are something that we can develop together, because you know, in I sit on some committees, you know, in you know, and one of the, I'm sure it must be your experience as well, but what we did usually, at least at Harvard level, was to concentrate on certain applications, to look at what kind of background the student is coming from. And if we found a student of a certain ethnic background, we focused on finding what is good in that student. Of course, didn't meant that the student was not, you know, we didn't get the students who were not qualified. The people who sent us applications were themselves qualified, because they passed the threshold of minimals. Now the next was, were we willing to do extra work, invest our time, energy, and attention and believe me, that support, once we give, it really is rewarding, because it just goes to a different level. And in other instances where we don't have this, it's really like, okay, you know, we helped, you know, student, or we graduated student, but doesn't really reflect. And I think what it really takes is how we go out and stand truth to our values. And sometimes it will mean that we might have to be innovative in approaching certain you know, academic or meritorious kind of, you know, distinctions.
Can I make this? Okay, I'm Sampath Kumaran, and superintendent from TIFR, Conductor Metal Physicist. I'm now sort of formally associated with Homi Science Center in some capacity. So I think I like your lecture. You made very interesting points. I completely agree with Ravi. I mean, it's something has to be done definitely. But I just want to make two, three. One is that the vegetarianism need not be connected with the Brahminism. Even non-Brahmins are vegetarians. I mean, therefore, don't you should not use vegetarianism to talk about caste or underprivileged or privilege. The second point I want to make is that I happen to I have some experience on various IIT and ISERs. I must say that if you think that the discrimination of selection, there absolutely no discrimination of selection for faculty member, that I can guarantee. In fact, people are trying to make extra efforts to try to see whether there is any OBC or scheduled caste member, and it is not that easy. I'll come to the next point. Now, therefore, I agree with Ravi that there are special attempts are made without any bias, without any discrimination. People are actually trying to see whether some people can be infected from that class. But if person doesn't meet the criterion, ultimately, sometimes if you really take somebody at it could be with OBC, it could be upper caste, lower caste, doesn't matter. Somebody far below the level, students whom they are going to train, they will eventually suffer. 5 years down the line, they are going to be reviewed. If they perform as per the merit which you have, you would ask them to leave. Then the question would come: if this person has been thrown out because he belongs to some underprivileged class. So therefore, we have to be really careful when it comes to academic. Other jobs, I agree. When academic, some bare minimum standard is expected. Now, I agree with you. When you have 75% population below a class, you can't you find the problem is somewhere else. We have to start from class 1 under elementary school. We have to go to the particular. By the I myself took some students belonging to so-called scheduled caste. I came to know. So BSc, I came the person very bad. I took an extra effort to give a project in my laboratory. I invited him. I spent some time. He did extremely well. Even published a paper with me in 1 year. And now he is a scientist in BRC. What I want is that there people, I would say academic community in general, particularly these days, I don't know about the olden days, or trying to, they don't look at which caste somebody belongs to. They try to say what a person, whether he can do something, even person average, below average, irrespective of the caste, he tries to how best to give a chance to him, bring him up. I think by and large, people are making an effort. They may question where is the problem. Problem, in my opinion, is that you see, people have really go to the villages, even people at all levels, politicians, you need to go to educate people. Please come for education. Please come for education. Give them enough support and try to, if at that level you require proper education, not at PhD level. When somebody admit PhD, you require bare minimum background. Otherwise, the fellow will feel miserable. So you have to start from that level, educate them, give them a lot of moral support, give them encouragement. There you don't. I think that is being done, beginning providing scholarship, everything. But enough is not being done. Still, the politics being used a vote bank. This is a fact. So you want to really start support at that level and bring them up. And same thing with the women. Same question comes, women. Why? How many women are in science? Same question. We keep meeting. Of the question comes up. So I would say, by and large, as far as my knowledge goes, wherever committee which I sat, there is no discrimination. Only thing that even a bare minimum threshold we don't have. This is a fact. The problem is somewhere else. I mean, this is my observation. Sorry. I don't know whether Ravi, I don't know whether Ravi agrees with me. So
hello.
Yeah.
Hello.
Yeah.
Hello. I'm Sonavne here.
Yeah, I let Suraj respond, and then Sonavne, you can.
Yeah. Give me time. I want to reflect on Mr. Sampath Kumaram's views.
Definitely.
On reservation and discrimination. I will talk after that. Okay.
Is Vinod part of the TIFR community?
Yes, Yengde,
Yes.
I know you. I'm Sonavne Vinod, TIFR working, and I'm one of the member here, being as a SC background.
Why don't you then talk instead of me talking?
Yeah. Okay. Okay. I have listened this Sampath Kumaram, and the one point which I want to raise is that, see, I am working in Homi Bhabha Center for Science Education, which is part of Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, and this is one of the section. In this section till 1993, there was no research scholar exam till 1993 from its inception, right? So you can guess that what kind of reservation it was. This institution was only open for other classes and not reserved. And let me tell you that being as a reserved person, see for deprived people or lower economical status people, one of the major tasks and one of the major challenge in city like Mumbai or Pune or any metropolitan city is that they want to become strengthened by their economy only, not by education. They don't prefer to get doctorate degree. Okay, this is my one point. They don't go for higher education. They want safety for their life. That is why they go for job. They will go even for a lower job in say any other service or laboral work other than getting the higher education, because it is the priority. And the main thing is that they are economically low background, and so that the caste is there. And this is the casteism. You are talking about the casteism as a discrimination, and this discrimination is there from all the institutions in India from their inceptions. You see in the TIFR, in the academic, none of the person at a professor degree is a scientist, so-called professor. He is not from any SC or SC background. Not a single. That is what I know since my service of 30 years. Okay, so you can understand. And what we get, we buy the airplanes and the balloons from China. We purchase our firefighter plane from the countries whose population is 7 crore only, right? We purchase everything from outside and we only export the agricultural thing. Our country is only agricultural based. You can understand that in the recent pandemic period, we have understood that only farmers in the country have given birth to our country, not any other thing. This is the discrimination. Thank you very much. Yengde, you can reply on that. Professor Dr. Yengde, you can reply on that. You can give your
sorry, Mr. I think if there is discrimination, yeah, let me make it clear. If there is discrimination, I'm trying to say discrimination should not be there. If something happened 1993, I do not know. It should not be there. I'm all for supporting it. One should do that. And so it should start from a lower level. It should be at a higher level. As a lower level, give them proper support, encourage them, go out of the way to help them out, bring them to the fore. This is what I'm trying to say. One should do. One should encourage. It should be done at all levels. Then it is easier to identify candidates who are bright when they come to a higher level.
See, the thing is that you people, open category people, they don't want any other caste people in the institution. That is all. That's all.
No, sorry, I'm not sorry.
I am very clear about that.
I'm not getting any fight here. I made an observation.
No, I am not fighting.
We should support all. I'm sorry, we should support right from lower level. So easy to identify brighter candidates. I myself took some candidates when I came to know from a college in Bombay, and I support it. Is doing very well. Okay, we should try to find out. It should be done at all levels. It will be easier if you do from lower levels. Easy. At least 10 years down the line, you will find much larger number of candidates. I'm taking a positive input. I'm not trying to criticize these things. I'm taking a positive suggestion. One should do it at all levels.
Suraj, you want to respond? There are a couple of questions in the comment section as well.
I think Ayush and someone else wanted to raise their hand if they want to.
Yeah. So if you want to reply for Sambat's and Vinod's points, you can do that, and then we can take up these questions, or I can take it up right now itself.
Or if they had a point on similar, we could take, or else if there's something else, I can just reply. That's what
Vinod's point is slightly different. Ayush's point is related. Ayush, you want to speak that out, or? Should I read it?
I would just prefer to hear Dr. Yengde.
So
Okay.
I think one of the I think differences we don't really explore is we are not willing to be vulnerable in these conversations. What we usually do is we try to have a very knee-jerk type of engagement with these questions. Now, Mr. Sampath Kumaran's point is very valid in this case. He is saying we should start from the childhood. That should happen. But what about those who are already here with you? Will you send them to primary school now? If they're with you right there, you need to find a solution in that space. And for that to happen, we cannot apply same metrics of merits because merit is not static. I have proven in my research, there have been, my colleagues at business school have been talking about, especially in the enterprise. I think and it's very interesting for me, especially the conference papers that we get, especially in America, when they're looking for diversity candidates, Indian Brahmins are the first to file their positions into this. And I've seen this within the postdoctoral, especially in the engineering department at MIT's, when we were just doing a cursory glance of what kind of postdocs come from India and look at the caste statistics. So what happens is we are willing to work within the dynamics of reservation contra diversity when it comes to drawing benefits outside India, but we are not willing to emulate the similar work ethic in our own self. And I think that's the level of what I was calling initially is a very hypocritical stand. So what we perhaps need to think is, how about we all work on two projects? One is, of course, Mr. Sampath Kumaran's important point of let's start from the beginning. And that is not saying let's start from the beginning. That's like we need to do active engagement on that. We need to do extra work. But also finding out people from the community, hiring them and preparing them. And it's very good to know that his students are doing well in BARC. You see, that's the kind of inspiration we need to create. We cannot create repetition of agraharams. We cannot have this repeating every stage of life. It's a difficult status. And so what we need to also understand is the over and extra representation of certain communities. We need to identify how many percentage of Brahmins exist, how many percent of Baniyas, how many percentage of these Khatris are dominating these positions. Because it is at the end of the day a matter of democratic charter. If we are not willing to replicate that, then what we essentially do is we don't contribute much to the field, much to the knowledge, because contributing to the field is not just publishing a journal article and advancing the knowledge, but also changing the way the structure is. And I think we really need to emphasize that again and again. As I have said already, if we needed women candidates, we found women candidates. We didn't, we also, of course, looked at, even if she's woman, she needs preferential treatment. Let's give it. Because we have to correct the wrongs. We have not had women representation in this field, and let's do it. Similarly, we should now start, I don't know much happens, but especially for the people who are physically challenged. This kind of underrepresentation is what is very, essential to how we work with this. And in this field especially, which is very much a, people say, we need people of certain qualifications to come here. I don't think that's as difficult. Every field has its own niche. Every field needs certain qualifications. What we need is effectively to, like I personally mentored a student who was, who wanted to study law, but who had come from, a science discipline, physics mostly. And it took me some time to mentor the student, and of course, he has passed law. He's gone to Oxford and doing his own things. What that really means is, I found that student interesting. I found the student was invested, although he didn't come from law field. He said he wanted to do something in law. I had interviewed him, and I found him, and the process began. I think that's what I'm trying to essentialize emphasize that there is no essentialization of selecting or rejecting. All it does is how courageous, how morally accountable are we willing to be to our own self and to the constitution of this country.
Thanks, Suraj. We have a couple of questions. Jeanette asked, how is giving opportunity, presence of representation of few people from marginalized community can help the whole of marginalized community to grow? Can it act otherwise instead?
Oh, I think it's an important question Jeanette Rahman has raised. The few people, and I'm totally on sync with that. But again, the point is we need someone, and what that few people can do in most instances, at least from the, I can talk about SC/ST experience, mostly SC experiences, it creates almost a snowball effect. We need people. We see, first of all, people ask me personally, what do you want to do? I say, I want to inspire people. I want to inspire, because if I'm able to plant the seed of inspiration, my job is done. Because the more inspiration we get, the more we kind of work around, right? And for that to happen, if we are able to even get those few, that few might convert into many, right? And that many can be then, of course, be most and so forth. But again, if your argument, Jeanette Rahman, is that the few people that we are hoping might instead not help the majority, I mean, there is always the case, but that's not something we need to think about right now when we don't even have a model to compare with. And that's why I think if that few could be many, I'm all for it, but there should be no less than few.
Gurinder wants to ask a question. Yeah, go ahead, Gurinder.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah.
Yes. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, no, the argument that, okay, so we should actually kind of start from the, you can say, primary level. And then the argument that actually there are not, you can say, enough students at PhD or you can say higher levels. I think it's a related argument. It's a circular thing. So since you don't have a presence of you can say these SC, ST, OBC or other, you can say, marginalized people in academia or in the higher education institutes, so it actually kind of feeds to the so your education or your whole what is the kind of science, the kind of education you are doing in the institution is actually you can say kind of based upon single, you can say, ideas or perspectives, and that's what feeds to the, you can say, primary education also. So if you have people from different, we can say, if you have people from diverse backgrounds in academia, that will also actually kind of impact who is actually coming into the primary education even. Because the kind of science or the kind of issues that those will be taken up, so they will make a change in what is being taught in the schools also, I think, what is meaningful in education. So this is my comment. I have a question. I think it's for HBCSE people. Like, I was wondering about the reservation policy, which is being followed across the country. Why it is not, you can say, followed for PhD students and faculty at HBCSE or TIFR, or is it followed?
So should I respond to that? I mean, that's a sort of a question about official policy. See, most institutions in the country follow reservation for various categories. I mean, either staff or students or admitted, etc., because they're forced to by law. And some institutions are exempted from that, from being forced, and TIFR is one of them. So if TIFR, if the law was applicable to TIFR, TIFR would have to follow it. And since the law is not applicable, it does not follow it. In fact, what is desirable is that voluntarily those institutions which are not legally obliged to follow reservation should follow a voluntary policy of encouraging diversity, which has not happened, which is unfortunate. I think it's time that we started doing that proactively. And I'm happy that some of Mr. Dr. Yengde's suggestions are, in that direction, and we'll certainly, I hope that we take it up seriously as an institution. I think whether to conduct pre-doctoral camps, we did that for women master's students in physics recently. TFR and Homi Baba Center collaborated, but we should do it for other diversity groups, and particularly for STEM education. I think that's a good suggestion. The other suggestion that came from him of having, putting in extra efforts to bridge whatever gap is there in terms of qualification or in terms of expectations that we have for the PhD program. How do we do that? I mean, that's daunting because I've, reflecting back on my own efforts as a PhD supervisor and so on, I think it's going to be difficult, but we can't avoid getting into it. And certainly, I think it's well taken. If we want the community to be diverse and we look for diversity, we are going to do that. We are going to find it. Good point. And therefore, the corollary is that we haven't been doing it so far, which is also true, I think. And I accept that. And I think we should. Yeah, thank you for the talk.
No, that's indeed. I mean, thank you, Professor Brahmaniam. I think it's a welcome step that, there's something of that. I supervised 2 Brahmin students, just to give an example, who comes to Harvard, of course. And so, I one of the things was I had to put my extra efforts in them as well, right? And because they were doing something that was really putting them out of comfort zone. Not that they were not talented, not that they were not qualified. It's just that it took a conscious effort from me to really mentor them, spend more time with them. And I'm happy to inform one of them is doing great. Started a new program. But what that really also made me realize is that if I had ignored the students who really wanted to do an important research, I would have really deprived them of these future opportunities. And of course, in our own supervision, we see these kind of parameters. And what Mr. Sampath Kumaran said is in the review process and all. I mean, let's not get into bureaucratic hangovers in this, right? I mean, one of the punishing aspects, especially at IITs, the experience within Dalit student has been that once they got into PhD program, published with their co-supervisors as a co-author, during the review process, the kind of caste angle really bothered. Most of them were North Indian Brahmins, especially at Kanpur, really penalized their own students. You know what I mean? Like this is highly unethical, where a supervisor is complaining or strategizing against his own student. I mean, you invest so much; it's almost like you're a prodigy that's going to carry your name to new circles, and that's why what I really invite my colleagues in the supervisory role here is. To actually think about your role as a epoch maker or changing the way things have been. And I think and that takes a little bit of effort, but I think if we are able to streamline that within a generation, things will change. And I think one of the ways I always tell is if you want to leave a legacy that is really going to be resounding, is not to produce the same form of people with the same sort of names, is to get more diverse people. So there is an acknowledgement, there is a conscious, and not to say my colleagues, especially in IIMs, are themselves Brahmins, but they have taken upon themselves that they're not going to carry on that as it has been. And I think that's sobering personally for me. And they did that. Some of them who got them into program, their students are now in foreign country, doing great. So I think I just wanted to kind of congratulate you for acknowledging and also add my support to that initiative.
Hi, Suraj. I have a point regarding the comment you made about privatization. So I think we need to distinguish here between for-profit and community initiatives, which are also private. So I'm basically talking with my experience from the context of Kerala, where if we look at it, it's perhaps the only Indian state where Muslims are at par with any other community in terms of education and all other parameters. And if you look into what resulted into this, we can find that it has been lots of community initiatives, like private run, but community initiatives, schools, colleges, which resulted in this. So we have to distinguish between if Muslims in Kerala also have waited for like angels from government to come and salvage them, I think they would have been in the same state as they are in other states. So initiatives from within the community, of course, there has been many other factors which have positively enabled them to do it, but private initiatives from within the community can help a long way. That's my observation.
That's good. See, I think, one of the things, like, for example, TFIR is not mandated. Similarly, much of the private institutions, most of the Ivy Leagues in America are not mandated, but they did that. And, and the standard was not compromised. Ivy Leagues are still the leading institutions. And this is the history, dating civil rights 1960s. Jews were not even allowed, right? So what it is really providing us a unique opportunity to not think about a knee-jerk reaction to certain things. Think about investing in future. And really, this is a future. If the Ivy League institutions had remained confined to WASP, the Anglo-Saxon Protestant kind of ethic, it would have gone to dogs. It would not have produced, Kennedys and the likes. So there is a very, and of course Obama, again an exemplifying example is. So what we need to do is we need to consciously direct and take an example from the rest of the world. Why are these institutions the way they are? And I think there is a more nuance and subtlety than what our visible our eyes can see. So to that, Masood, these institutions are private. There is no government aid. Of course, government kind of helps them with the status of taxes, but otherwise, there is a certain responsibility that people have reckoned with.
Okay, so we have a couple of comments in the chat box. We want to reply to that.
Sure.
I can read it. I think it is unconscionable for upper caste persons in the academy to argue that spaces like TFR are non-discriminatory. They are built on structures of oppression that make them hostile and even violent towards members of non-dominant castes. As a Brahmin woman, I have found STEM institutes in this country to be hostile to me. I can only imagine how much worse these institutes can be for persons from non-dominant caste communities. It's one comment. Yeah, go ahead.
I think, the commenter really, told what it is. I think, even the woman experiences, are not mainstreamed. It's mostly a Brahmin male, which goes under the name of Hindu male, and if you look at the statistics of all India level, representative survey, at least I'm talking about 2017-18, 73% of faculties across institutions, 6 types of institutions are there, categories of education institutes, 73 were Hindu male, which is really, and of all that, Muslim women were 0.5%. So if you look at the diversity studies and scheduled caste, scheduled caste were 5.4 and scheduled tribes to 3%. This is, and if you look at the female of all this, they fare pretty low. Comparatively, the Hindu female were represented as opposed to the non-represented. And I think this is where the person who has raised the comment, her and other women folks should take upon themselves that your struggle is not only yours. You can make it broader struggle. You can create a big tent, get the people who are fighting for diversity of various sorts, caste, region, class, sexuality, all related politics. You need to create a good corpus in that. And so I think it's an appeal to the women folks of dominant castes to actually take upon themselves as well to try to create inroads into this.
Okay, another comment. I'm glad to have shared a space with you, Mr. Yengde. I agree with you that caste does not exist for those who are privileged. We can initiate dialogue among people around us, deliberately considering the marginalized communities. Our education should make us aware of reality of our society, make us inquire about the certain norms which highly differentiate among people.
Certified. I think you should organize more, non-science reading groups, or create an unofficial kind of educational groups, read novels which can talk about caste, social issues, organize film clubs. So kind of sensitize yourself. Don't be like the atom, or don't be like a solid stone that doesn't change. We are humans, and our heart can change, and just not use the elite argument of science as being meritorious doesn't really sit well, at least to the global experiences.
Okay, there is one from Vinod again. Recently, all directors body in India wrote to PM and central government that not to implement reservation in scientific institutions. What's your reflection?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more Professor Subramaniam can comment to that as to how he thinks about this, because one of the things we started, at least 2017 onwards, we targeted on IIM. Actually, we went to court because they are mandated, and by that time, the BJP government immediately passed a law to make IIM kind of exempt from this. And it has really created this extremely kind of bland space. You don't really want it. It really reeks of elitism and disgrace if you find it. And I think they want to do more and more, because they know we are challenging them. We're challenging them in the court. And I think we really should examine what science is in India. There is a book Abhasur has written about it, especially talking about experiences of science. A book is called Radiance. Abhasur. She's a professor colleague at MIT. Look up. She talks about women in science, but also about scheduled castes within the space, and that can be a good study. Meghnad Saha, for example, for all good reasons. I don't know how many of you all even knew about him, but I think these are the caricatures that we need to see, and I think the leadership should now take upon themselves. That's what I'm saying. Like, they will go under the same argument. I have helped somebody. That's not going to help. Don't help anybody. Just follow the Constitution. You're responsible. You're accountable to a common document. If you're not, you're a criminal, and a criminal needs to be penalized according to a criminal act. If you are against Constitution, and these people are no different than the people who are trying to incite war in the country, because they don't want to respect constitutional norms. Constitution is something that binds us together. But under the logic of extra constitution, science is apparently beyond Constitution. It's extra constitutional mandate. Tomorrow you might create a terror attack and then create, we have to really, and let me tell you, Switzerland, especially ZTE institutions and other institutions have done that. America has done that. UK has done that. CERN has done that for all reasons. Why not us? Why not? And by the way, people are not like, they don't go to CERN, they don't go to Caltech or others. They go there, they benefit out of it. So why not then implement the same when you come back? I think this is why many of us are disappointed and saddened that people, when they benefit from this, do not want to share this. So that's my anguished and sad response to your invocation, Vinod.
There is a connected comment to that by Nagarjun. Non-mandate is an excellent opportunity to show the way. We are not mandated because we are expected to experiment more bravely.
That's, I think, the quote of today's talk.
Then yeah, Durga Prasad. Yeah, the title of the book is Dispersed Radiance, Caste, Gender, and Modern Science in India. That's so. Any other question, or we are well past? Yeah, go,
Since
case.
Dr. Yengde, specifically wanted me to respond, I think, to that news report. Of course, I mean, I'm not completely free to, express an individual opinion, but I do feel that in return for what these institutes are demanding, that is exemption from implementing the, constitutional reservation. Uh, in return for such an exemption, they must be asked to produce diversity statistics, set targets for themselves, and do it in the way that Nagarjun is suggesting. I think if it's a non-mandatory and voluntary embracing of diversity, and they must set targets for themselves, which in a reasonable period reaches the kind of levels which are mandated by the Constitution. I think that would be a fair demand in my view. And I think these institutions should be held accountable in those ways, including TIFR. That kind of a pressure must exist, I think, on these institutions.
Thanks, Case. Any other questions or comments, or if not, we can wind up. Okay, and let's. Is there a comment? No. Okay, then let's join. Let's thank Dr. Yengde for such a wonderful talk, and thank you, Suraj. It was a great talk. Yeah.
Oh, I appreciate it. I appreciate
Thank you very much, Dr. Yengde.
Oh, thank you, Professor Subramanian. Thank you, Ayush. Thank you, Masood. Thank you, all the excellent colleagues here and as well as online on YouTube. I've learned a great deal, and I hope to learn more. This was educational experience, and thank you for being open to hearing the critical thoughts that I have. And I think I can see there is an air of acceptance and change. Maybe when pandemic is off and when I'm in India, I'll come to have a vegetarian food in one of your messes, and we will talk more on this.
Good fish and egg as well. So anyway, welcome. Occasionally chicken also, I think. Yeah. Anyway, most welcome. So again, thank you.
Take
Bye.
care all. Stay strong and fight COVID. Bye.
Yes. Bye-bye.